And how were you getting all of your information or research? Because I imagine a lot of these things, you can only get it from people who are on the ground, who have seen it in real life. It's not just available online. So how did you get those good, solid intel for you to build your business model?
So in the beginning, we used online information because we were in London, halfway across the world. We used a lot of resources online to craft together a idea of what was going on. And then what happened was that we started to realize that all of the resources was done by like one or two organizations. So we then decided, let's contact these people. We contact the International Rice Research Institute, which is basically like the UN of rice. And they know everything about it. And after spamming a couple of people with clickbaity emails, a couple of them got clickbaited and replied us. And after bouncing around to a few of them and taking very early morning calls because our time zone is way behind in London, we finally got to people who were on the ground, who was working specifically, like the guy who developed the technologies that were being deployed in the field. And that's when they told us, okay, so this country is like this country is like that. This is how you are helping them. This is how you can't help them. And this is where you should go.
And I think that UCL also provided a lot of support as well. Like before your first round, which was the UCL round, you actually went to Bo Teal, who I believe is the business advisor, and he basically gave advice on what you thought was an amazing pitch at the time. What was it like meeting with him?
When we first met Bao, it was very interesting. We had practiced our presentation for the campus round of the HULT Prize with all of our friends every single night for the whole week. And we had changed it every single day. So improve. So we thought like, okay, the last 2 nights, people have been like, this is great, this is amazing, we got it. We're going to get some real good feedback from these people. We go in and Bao destroys us. He rips apart our presentation by asking us a couple of very, very pointed questions that really revealed the weaknesses of our business model.
What kind of questions was he asking?
At that time, we had no answer to why do we need more rice? Why reduce the amount of waste in the rice industry? How many people are hungry? And we had no answer to that. Honestly, all we needed was actually a Google search on how many people are actually hungry in this world. And there are actually like 800 million people hungry every year. So it's actually a really big issue. Not having enough food is not just a concern now, but a concern in the future as well, because our overpopulation will like outpace production, right, by a certain year. And there's a real concern of whether we have enough food to eat by 2050. And he was basically trying to get that point across to us. But he wanted us to understand why he was asking that. Because he was like, if you're just presenting about reducing waste with no idea of what the waste is going to tackle, then like, what's the point? And I think what happened was when we realized that, oh no, this is a big change, that we're going to have to redesign out the whole reason for why we exist. We thought that it would be impossible. And he was like, you guys should just change the whole thing. And then I was like, no, I'm not going to listen to you. I don't want to listen to you. When we went back, we were so dejected. We were like, oh, maybe we should just not listen to him, he's just being mean. But when we realized that he had a point, and then we had two choices. Either we continue what we had, which was like a very good, well-polished presentation with some flaws, yes, but maybe not everyone asked us that question. And we just practiced until we became really good at presenting it. Or we took his advice and sort of revamped the whole thing, insert new information and tried to redesign the thing within 2 days. Eventually, we decided to do the latter. And well, it turned out well because we won by a very, very narrow margin. But a couple of months later, we met Bao again, and he told us that actually he did that to every single team who met him. And nearly every single team did meet him. And the point is, it's not difficult to do that to a early stage team because it's so early stage, it's always very easy to find the flaws. But what he wanted to see was he wanted to actually pose that team with that exact problem I just talked about. Do you do what you do without any risk because you're afraid to take the risk? Or do you take the risk and try to make it better? And he was happy that we took the risk and make it better. And he was happy that that's where we were at. And that started off a very good relationship. And we still talk to him today and he still helps us out, advises us even to this day.
So you said that most teams went to him. Did most teams take on his advice or decide to just continue?
No, most teams just decided to continue and just not take the risk.
Wow. So you went through the UCL round, and after the UCL round, you changed a lot as well. One of it was that you switched your operations from Vietnam to Myanmar. So what were those big changes? How did that come about?
Well, our switch happened more precisely after the regional rounds, but how did the change came about was because we spoke to the International Rice Research Institute, and it was very funny because we knew that they know more about rice than us. So it would be funny if we pitched to them what we want to do. So we told them in the beginning, like, okay, before we present our idea to you, we're going to put a disclaimer that we definitely have some information wrong or some information that's not up to date because you guys have the latest information. You definitely know about this more than us. I'm going to skip the part about where we're going to pilot this at because what I'm going to do is I'm going to present an idea to you. And at the end, I hope you'll tell me two things. First is you'll tell me which of my information is wrong and give me the correct information. And the second is you'll tell me where can this be implemented. And so I did that. And at the end, he told us, yeah, you should go to Myanmar.
And why Myanmar?
Because he mentioned that the market was ready for it, meaning that the farmers were aware of this problem. They were aware of the benefits. They just didn't have access to it. So they were like at that cusp where you have awareness and education, but you don't have access yet. So all you need is someone to come in with access.
And that was not the case for Vietnam.
In Vietnam, they already had access. So it would have been too late. We'd just be coming in like a competitor.
So once you have decided that it was going to be at Myanmar, then I suppose you had to start planning to actually go to Myanmar rather than just doing everything.
That was the fun part.
Firstly, you had to raise funds because I don't imagine anyone gave you any money, right? You had to support yourself and go there, run the pilot. Tell us about how you firstly raised the funds.
So there's this very famous entrepreneurship thing where like you can raise funds from the 3Fs, friends, family, and fools. We didn't go down that path. So what happened was, well, we turned to UCL first, right? And we realized that we essentially had nothing, right? We had no money. So what we had was we had a pitch. That's it. Like we just had a good presentation. Because HULT Prize is, I guess, one of the nerve-wracking parts about HULT Prize is it's winner take all every single round. So like one winner emerges from the campus round to go to the regionals. One winner from the regionals goes to the accelerator, and then 6 teams go from accelerator to finals, and one winner, like second place, gets nothing. So we had a good pitch, right, after the regional rounds, but we had no money. So we went to UCL and we told them, like, okay, we need funds. This is why. We had gone further than anybody expected at that time. But at the same time, there's still a long way to go to the finals. So it's still a 50-50 on like, okay, are they like, are they like going to do it or not? Can they go the distance? And Bao was like, all right, since all you guys have is a very good pitch, right? Go and join another pitch competition that gives you money if you win on that round itself. Smaller one. He asked us, when does your exam end? Because this was right before our exams. We told him, okay, our exam ends on one of the Fridays, right? And he was like, okay, sorry, on the Tuesday that your exam ends in the morning, on the Thursday, the Friday, there's a competition that's coming up. And then I was like, okay. And then he was like, if you want, this is an interesting competition because it's with all the other London unis. And what they do is it's a bit like a poker game. Each uni is only able to submit one startup to enter. And this startup has to have won something else. So that was fine for us because we won the HULT already. So they enter and the uni will pay a sum of money for that person to enter. And what will happen is that this entry fee will be pulled from all the universities will be pulled together and the winner will take it all. So it's a bit like poker. And so he was like, if you want, we can pay for you to go. And then it's up to you to like do us proud. And then we were like, okay, let's do it. So we went and then we only realized that after we finished our exams, right, we realized that the competition format was totally different from HULT. It was like, for HULT, we had 6 minutes, it went into 2 minutes. And so, can you imagine like 6 minutes presentation, you cut down to 2 minutes, it's nearly impossible. And so all the rules changed. Example is like, many people say that if you pitch, right, try to use as few words as possible. Use more pictures, more imagery, be more interactive. For 2 minutes, it's flipped because you need them to read more. So you need to put a little bit more words and say less so that they have time to fill in the gaps. So it's very tricky. And this is where our relationship with Bao sort of started being crystallized more because he actually came in and I remember, I think on the Thursday when we met him, the day before, he was like, okay, like this is actually the way you guys have been doing, like cutting it down is a bit wrong. We have to like go the other way. And so he sat with us until like it was like 1, 2 a.m. at UCL, the hatchery space, just the 3 of us around the table, this whiteboard, and we just like write slide 1, slide 2, that kind of thing. We really worked late into the night. Next day we started practicing it. We delivered the presentation and then we found out that they will only let us know 1 month later who won, even though they had decided on the spot. I was like, what? But okay, it doesn't matter. But throughout that process, right, UCL saw how hard we worked and how good our presentation was. And they also said at the end, they were like, okay, we'll give you a bit of funds in the beginning, like a couple of 1,000-2,000 pounds, start you off so that you have something. You don't have zero, but you have something. And maybe you can use this something to get more. I think that is sort of like the trick. You show them how serious you are. And so then we decided, but once we did that once, right, we went back and I was like, okay, maybe we should just scour the net for any sort of like tournaments like this and we can join and see if we can get our pilot funding from winning all these. And that's what we eventually did.
How much funding were you supposed to raise?
So we estimated that we would probably need definitely more than 10,000 US dollars because the machinery itself that we were going to would cost that much. So if you added in the other costs, we will probably be looking at something close to about 20,000 to do a pilot. And we eventually managed to get to that figure. There was a moment when momentum was high and we were actually winning quite a few. We joined Talk for Food in Brazil. We joined like UCL Entrepreneurs Venture Fund at UCL. We also joined like some in Malaysia. Everyone would give like 1,000, 500, 2,000. And when you all pulled it together, that became enough for us to basically run our first pilot.
What do you think was the reason, if you were, that you guys stood out and you managed to win all these competitions? Because you hadn't even gone to the country yet. You had nothing beyond pure research to show for and a very polished pitch.
To be honest, it depends on which sort of competition you join as well. There are some that do want to support people like that. There are some that where they know that we want to support ultra early stage startups where it's just an idea. And the reason is they need that a bit of that funds in order to make the ideas a reality. And I think people invest in people, not in the idea itself. So it's really about whether they believe that you would execute it, or you would take that money and just spend it. Because they at that stage, they have no control. Like they're not asking for something in return. It's just like a prize. So you have to really believe that this person will actually take the funds and utilize it for something that is meaningful. I mean, we didn't have to hide it. We could really show people that we were sincere. We were excited to do this because we wanted to pilot it. And that sort of rubbed off on people. And we would find interesting ways to stand out. For example, because we haven't piloted, right? So how do people get a concept? One of the Talk for Food in Brazil, right? They had this challenge where you had to submit a video application describing your idea. Now, ideally, when you describe the idea, you get to show your idea. How are we supposed to show them? We are not farmers. We were in London. So what I told my friend was like, you know how we always describe that at that time, we had a machine called the solar bubble that we were hoping to implement in the field. We always, when people didn't understand how it worked, we always described it is imagine a solar panel connected to a hairdryer connected to a plastic bag. And then the plastic bag is where you put the rice in and you just put a hairdryer. I say, since we always tell people this, I was like, what if we actually do it in real life? We go and find a hairdryer, make something look like a solar panel, get some rice, put it on a plastic bag and dry it while we are talking about the thing. And that's what we did. So I remember one fine day in Russell Square, we went down, there were people having their picnics. We laid out our mat and we put some rice there and we started drying it with a hairdryer. Well, you can't actually power the hairdryer. And then my Keeson had this brilliant idea where he was like, because we were talking about improper drying methods, right? So when he flashed that, he made the words come out like improper drying methods. This is like what we want to change. And it was so fun. It helped us stand out and it helped people remember us. And I think sometimes most people underestimate the power of being memorable. If you're memorable, then people remember what you do and they're more likely to actually like pick you for an opportunity.
Incredible. So you raised 20,000 pounds and you were ready to go to Myanmar. What was the plan? What were you telling people? I believe you reached out to Vani, who eventually became one of your teammates, and you said, hey, you want to spend your summer planting rice? So was that the idea? Yeah. What were you planning to do?
That statement actually came from Vani herself, because when I described it to her, it sounded like I wanted her to be a farmer. So I asked her before our exams and then I messaged her again after our exams, I remember. And she was like, why, you want me to plant paddy for you? Then I was like, yes. But I think the plan at that time, we just really wanted to get into the communities and we wanted to speak to the farmers. We wanted to do our customer surveys. We wanted to understand our work, understand our market. And getting to it was a challenge, right? Costs would be involved getting there. Coordination had to be involved getting there. It's a country we don't know, can speak the language. We need to get people who can speak the language. And we tried all sorts of ways. We actually found students at UCL who were like, hey, I'm from Myanmar and like, I'll follow, like, it sounds cool. And then we were like, yeah, sure. Maybe you just stay with us so we pay for your like accommodation and food. And they were like, yeah, sure, it's fun. Like I also never visited some of these communities before. And that's how we started. Like we honestly went there and we were like, the only goal is to get there and get the International Rice Research Institute staff to bring us there so that the farmers would trust us because they trusted them since they worked with them before. And then from there, that's where we started to explore. We would ask questions like, okay, so who do you sell to? Where do you buy this from? Can we meet this person? Can we meet this person tomorrow? Can we go to his house now? Do you have a friend who's also a farmer? Can we meet him now? Oh, my brother's a farmer. Oh, my brother owns a mill. Oh, can we go to your brother's mill now? We just kept doing that for like, I think 4 or 5 days. And then after a week of doing that, we sort of got an idea of the situation on the ground. And then that helped us because then we can go back and then we can analyze, all right, so what sort of business can we develop? What sort of model can we develop for it? And that's when the farmers told us the solar bubble was not what they wanted, because the capacity was too low. They wanted a biomass powered one, which was much bigger, which we had heard about but never really studied. So then we were like, okay, who manufactures it? Can we meet the manufacturer? All right. Can we meet someone who has used it before? And they were like, yes, you can meet. There's this region in the world, that region in our country which uses it. It's like 12 hours away. And I'm like, okay, the next time we come back, we're going to visit that. And that's honestly how we started. That's how we changed the technology we were using. We also had to swap the business model. We went from a buy and sell model to a pay-per-use, like a laundromat model. And we changed the technology from the solar bubble to a biomass powered dryer. And yeah, so a lot of things were fluid and changing, but we could only be confident on those changes because we had a picture of what was going on.
And I believe you're also charging them for storing the rice as well, taking percentage off.
So that actually came at the end when after subsequent visits, we also realized, oh, okay, after you dry, you can store, and people do store it. Farmers do want to store it. So you see, like every time we visit, there will be new information coming out. And I guess that's the point of engaging with them, engaging with the stakeholders, to understand the challenges they face, not just the challenges, but to understand their day-to-day lives. We realized that education is super important to them. Why? Because every house we went into, the first photos you see are huge pictures of their kids graduating. So we know that that's deeply relevant to them. So maybe a way would be to speak to their kids first, because we spoke to some children of farmers and they were like, yeah, like I want my dad to have this. If my dad doesn't listen to you, like tell me, I will speak to him. And then I asked them, but how sure your dad will listen to you? Then if I want, they will want, that kind of thing. Now I was like, okay, that's interesting. But you don't see this. A lot of people who are designing policies might not know this. It's normally a gap that's overlooked. Children of farmers, women farmers even, is overlooked in policy research. It's a well-known fact.
Well, I imagine just even getting to these places must have been an adventure, and it isn't the most straightforward of ways.
Yes. So the 12-hour journey I talked about. So what would happen was that we had two options. Either we fly to the capital city and take a 12-hour drive, or we fly to the capital city, fly to another city, and then take a 5-hour drive. So we were like, we might as well just take the 12-hour drive. And let me tell you, if you ever took 12 hours on the road, it's a very funny feeling between being tired and not tired, because you're simultaneously exhausted and rested at the same time. Thankfully, there are toilet breaks along the way. But what happened was that we landed, I think, in the morning, and we were due to arrive at midnight. So with breaks in between, we were driving along the roads and everything was fine. But at about like 11 p.m., suddenly the person who was driving us started checking the dashboard and then like started pressing buttons here and there. Then later, that was the first red flag. And then he started speaking to the scientists that were following us in like a worried tone, a hushed worried tone. And then like there was a second red flag. Third red flag was that he stopped the car and he walked out, opened the bonnet, fiddled with something, closed it, and then walked back and then started driving again. And then later did that again. And then after the third red flag, I was like, hey, is everything all right? Basically what happened was the car was overheating. There was a coolant that had run out. So what he was trying to do was to see how far he could push the engine without the coolant, but it wasn't very far because it gets overheated very fast. And so then what he tried was, he was like, okay, we have to put water. So he basically brought us to this well. And this is like in the middle of the night at 11:30 a.m. And it's not even in like the capital city, right? It's like jungle. It's like, country roads, like if you're traveling in like going up to Penang, like Perak, Kelantan, like all these very rural areas, like where the plantations are, it's like that. And so we went to a well, and he basically drawed water into like our empty water bottles. And he was like, you go pour inside this thing. Then I was like, okay. So we poured inside that. I was like, okay. We closed it and we drove. Now the thing is that, okay, I'm no expert, but coolants are not like water, right? It's like something else that has, I think, a very much higher boiling point. So the water boils damn fast and it runs out damn fast. I think like within 5 minutes, it'll be gone. So how far can you get in 5 minutes, right? And so what we had to do was, he would be like, okay, 5 minutes to the next well. And then if we know that it's going to be more than 5 minutes, we need to fill up a lot of empty bottle so that we can keep on filling up with water. And I think we did that for 30 minutes. And after that, he was just like, nope, engine dead. Like he sort of gave up, because as we were going up a hill, I remember as he was going up a hill, the engine started sputtering. He just turned it off because he was like, it's not going to work. We're not going to be able to cross this hill. And then he turned around as we were going up the hill and just sort of like slowly like rolled down. And he just stopped at the side of the road in the jungle. And it was like jungle on both sides. There was like this one house that was dark. I don't think it was a house. I think it was a shop or something like that. But it was dark. It was closed. It was made out of wood. And he was like, okay, we just maybe stop here since there's a chair so we can sit down. And we got a call for help. Then I was like, okay, so let's call for help. We called the police. We called the IRI, the International Rice Research Institute. We had rented a car. So we called the rental company. We called the hotel we were supposed to go to at 12. And they all responded that the hotel and the police couldn't come and get us. They didn't know where we were. And the people in the capital city, so like the IRI and the rental company, they were like, yeah, we can get to you, but we have to send another car and it's going to take them like 11 hours to get to you. Because, it took us 11 hours to get here, right? And I was like, don't you have like a branch in the other city, in the other capital road, and other like cities? And they were like, oh no, we don't really have anyone who can help us, not at this late hour. I was like, oh, then we were like preparing to sleep in the car. And it was quite horrible because I remember I was like, wow, it was particularly horrible for me because I remember I wanted to use the toilet and I was like, this is a bad idea. Like I was like, oh my God, everything is like dark and jungle. It just feels like anything can happen. And for the first time, right, I think one of the scientists who were following us was like, I've done a lot of field visits, but this is the first time I'm stuck in the middle of the night and no one can help me. So I was like, okay. But luckily what happened, it turned out, was that she called her sister, and her sister actually worked in that region before. So she knew a hulu of a village, so like the leader of a village, of a farming village actually, who lived only like an hour away. And so the guy was like, okay, I'm going to take my 4-wheel drive, my truck, and I'm going to drive to where your sister and her friends are. And so they actually, thankfully they came about an hour later, and we basically piled on and they drove us the last hour back. And it was very surreal because it was like an open air truck. So we had sit at the back and it was like midnight, right? And it's like jungle all around. So it's nature sounds all around. And we would just be looking up to the sky and I would be, I'll be like looking at my teammates and be like, can you imagine a couple of like months ago, we are like in university and like now we're traveling in like a forest that of a country we've only visited twice. And for some of us, it's first time. And now we're on our way, we're not stuck. We don't have to sleep the night in the van with people we don't know and like we've never met before and who could be taking us to our doom. I don't know. but we trust them implicitly. And it was very surreal and it was a bit of a moment I'll never forget.
And I'm imagining the kind of people that you were meeting, so they were also very fascinated with who you guys were. And there were girls following Kishum as well.
Oh, that story. It was quite unique to meet us because they don't get as many visitors. But what happened was, this is a funny story. This actually happened in our third visit. So at that time in the accelerator, when we were in the HULT Prize, half of us went back to go to the farms and half of us stayed in London. So I stayed in London. Apparently, when they went to the village this time around, there was a local university who happened to be in town and there was like a festival that they were having. So what happened was that they actually asked our team, do you guys want to give a speech? Do you want to talk about your work? And then they were like, yeah, sure, why not? And they were like, oh, who to who? Oh, just a couple of university students. So they were like, okay. They said, yeah, we'll contact you tomorrow morning. The next day they go there and they see this stage built in front of the farmer's house. I was like, what is going on? And they see like 4 chairs, like on the stage. I was like, what? And like there's these rows and rows and rows of chairs in the audience. And then suddenly they see this mass of like motorcycles coming in and like trucks and the van and like people park there and then like everyone starts crowding in and it's like a full-on event. So then they come up and I wasn't there, but the story that Vanny told me was like, oh, she said like there's this bunch of girls sitting in front of Kisum. And I think there was a question where they asked, do you have a girlfriend? And he was shocked by it. He said no. And then they started to laugh. And then Vanny apparently threw him under the bus because she walked over to them after that and she'd be like, you want his Facebook? And then and they all said yes. And they started like taking photos of his profile to add him. And we had a prank call once actually. Someone called him once and he picked up and he was like, hello. And then there was like silence. And then suddenly you hear like a lot of giggles and then they ended the call. And he was like, what? And we were like, oh, wow, like this is interesting. I remember like our Facebook likes jumped significantly. But that was just like a funny side story that happened in our journeys. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So after you did all that, you visited Myanmar for the first time, you came back in the summer, you had this global accelerator that you mentioned before, and it was at the former residence of Henry VIII. What was the purpose of gathering all of you? I think there were around 200 of you guys there. What was the whole purpose?
So the accelerator in our year was the first year they actually, HULT Prize expanded the accelerator round. So previously it would have been everyone who won the regionals would go to the finals because there were only 6 regionals. And they had an accelerator, but the accelerator was really only for those 6 teams to accelerate their growth basically. But that year they decided, since we had a lot more regionals and we had a lot more teams that they felt could also benefit and could also be a contender. It doesn't just have to be the winner of the regionals. So they decided to open the accelerator to about 40 teams. So they had 25 regional rounds because they were expanding, more people are participating. And there are like 10 people who came in through online applications from the pool of people who didn't win. And then I think another 15 from another special national rounds or something. So what happened was that all these people had won already a regional. So they were the best of the best. And what they wanted to do was that they wanted to make the accelerator in itself its own round as well. So they wanted to create, out of the 40 teams, only 6 would go to the finals. Which was why UCL was also can you guys do it? Can you guys go the distance? It's going to be very intense because it's a 6-week-long tournament. But the idea was to accelerate us, to give us a live, work, play environment where we could just focus. And the reason they chose a location away from everything, it's a bit like what the WEF does, at Davos, where they choose people, a secluded location. So you're forced to focus on what you do. And they will fly in experts from all around the world to come and give talks, to come and give time and office hours, mentors from all over the place. You just sit there and you just work and you just meet these 200 other people, some of which are still our friends today. And it was really an experience that you cannot replicate. We will never be able to relive it, even if I go back right now, because you can't participate in it. It's just a different experience.